Morning, everyone. We will call to order the June 11th Fiscal Affairs and Audit Standing Committee. Appreciate everybody joining us this morning. First item on the agenda under old business, approve minutes of the May 14th meeting. Any discussion on the meeting minutes? If not, we entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion from Regent Rolfe, second by Regent Dicus. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Okay, any opposed? Right. Minutes are approved. Any issues that we need to follow up on related to the agenda call? My notes don't indicate any. Hearing none, we will move into new business, the board agenda items under fiscal affairs. Any items on the consent agenda from my fellow regents that we need to pull off and discuss? Hearing none, excuse me, we'll move into new business or discussion agenda items. As you all know, this is the second read that the full board will consider this afternoon for university tuition and fee proposals. Thank you so much to the CFOs and the leadership for not only all your work on that, but also your close communication and collaboration with the student bodies. I think it's very helpful for them to be involved and for not only us, but all of our stakeholders to see how you engage the students. So thank you for doing that. Any, excuse me, any discussion, any follow-ups, any questions for the institutions related to any of the tuition and fee proposals? If not, I know the full board would appreciate a recommendation from this body moving forward this afternoon. So do we have any motions that would indicate such?
Is there any? I just want to make sure if there's any amendments or changes, requests or changes coming up. I'd move forward that we recommend to the board the tuition increases and fee increases as laid out.
I have a motion by Regent Rolfe, second by Regent Winter. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Thank you again for that. Thank you again to our institutions for all their hard work on that. This morning, we will also, obviously a little bit different than we've done it in the past, we'll receive kind of a first blush at the fiscal year 2027 unified appropriation request, and really appreciate all of you and certainly appreciate Vice President Frisbee and President Flanders for bumping that process up a little bit. We change this a little bit each year as we go, and I think we get a little better at it. But obviously receiving these in June gives us an opportunity before the state does their forecast in early July to be able to consider both of those as we head into the planning retreat in late July. So if I understand correctly, and Vice President Frisbee, correct me if I'm wrong on this, we obviously have received the institution's individual request, and I know there's been some discussion in COBO about possible system request. I think there's been discussion, but no, we haven't quite had consensus on that. So given that we have some time today, wanted to open up the opportunity to hear your thoughts on overarching system request that may need to be a part of our budget request for next year. And I'm not sure exactly how we want to begin that conversation, but I'll start it with you, Vice President Frisbee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, so the institutions have now all submitted some ideas for campus-specific items, and we won't recount those today, but there are clearly some themes among the different sectors, and cybersecurity is prime among those, as is student success playbooks, funding statutes that are in state law, like the Campus Restoration Act, where the legislature committed to 6 years of a certain amount, and we got a little bit of a haircut on that for 2026. So hopefully restoring that in 2027 and moving forward. There are also some challenges with under market pay at our institutions. And another campus had a thought about continued exemption from statewide budget reductions. So what you see on the screen, and I'm hoping that it's illegible, This is an Excel spreadsheet. It is quite similar to what is in the board agenda. The items that are in tan are not there, so the nature of requests as being recurring or one-time are noted. We're going to use this template for your discussion at the July budget workshop and board retreat. But for purposes of today's meeting, this is just to give you as regents that first preview, that first idea of what the institutions are thinking and starting to advance to you. But I know COBO had a chance to meet and talk about this last Wednesday. And our chair of COBO is also interim president, so he has to attend our SCOPS and COPS meetings. But other CFOs might want to comment a little bit about their thoughts on potentially advancing system-wide themes for all of the public universities.
Yeah.
Of communicating to our campus the challenges that we're going through. And we were just talking a little bit ago, the international student impact that's going on, the research impact on the grants. We have just on the Lawrence campus, a $30 million per year gap to market pay. And on the medical center campus, it's a $20 million gap to market pay. And we both received about $7 million combined from the state toward pay. So that, it helps, but it doesn't remotely get you there. And then you have inflation and all the other factors. And then the ones that are up there, everything Elaine has up there, when we talk about our challenges, it's cybersecurity. We're going to have a NITS assessment that's going to show gaps. And that funding got reduced or got eliminated this year from the state. So how are we going to deal with the NIST playbook? How are we going to deal with pay? How are we going to deal with reductions in research? And then the really big one we're all dealing with, and we're starting to even see this in the KU campus, is you can smell the enrollment thing coming. I mean, we're seeing it in our applications as they're starting to. So we'll be okay, but we're not going to be as high as last year. And I think we peaked. And so we're just talking, we have to pivot to different strategies like online or competency-based education. How are we going to deal with cybersecurity to protect those infrastructure that goes with that? What are you going to do about the fact that there's been a dismantling and kind of a vacating of the federal government on research? So how do you pivot the research area? So that sort of base funding, it could be pay, that could be cybersecurity. The need-based aid is a really big deal, particularly Pell Grants get hit under the federal government program. We're going to need a way to make college as affordable as possible. And we all had tuition increases, but we still have that. We're assuming that the Pell Grant and all the federal grants and the state grants are there. So, keeping the enrollment going by making it affordable and dealing with the base and the pay, there's lots and lots of challenges coming at us. So it's, from my perspective, and I think it's keeping that base maintained to deal with those challenges is really, and base is pay, base is need-based aid, base is infrastructure, bases, all these things, and making sure that we protect them going forward and they don't get cut back. I don't know if my colleagues would agree with that, but that's kind of the message that we're sending to our campuses and we're sending to our leadership. We got to keep that base growing to face these challenges that are coming up. If that helps at all.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that? Ethan?
I think the only other piece I might tack onto there is on that Campus Restoration Act. Getting that back to the statutory levels is critical, as we're working right now to sort of hone in on our 6-year plan. So we're planning for the entire length of that program. Many of the projects that we're sort of zoning in on are going to require philanthropic support. So it's critical for us to understand that we can make commitments to our philanthropic donors, that we have that match available from the state. And that's a huge selling point for them to be interested in contributing to some of those projects. So knowing that we had that commitment for that full 6, or for the rest period of that Restoration Act would really help us as we're out there trying to sell those projects, trying to get those across the finish line with our donors. So that might be the only other piece I would add on that.
Related to the student success investment that the state has made, I anecdotally have heard that you're starting to see that return. Are you able to quantify that in terms of retention rates? And is it translating into financial success, or is it still too early?
Sorry, definitely for Wichita State, we have seen improvement in retention that is tied to the efforts related to NIS. And I apologize, Regent Benson, I don't have those
Sure.
numbers with me exactly today,
Sure.
but we'd be happy to provide that.
Okay,
But yes, we have definitely seen.
very good. It's great to hear.
You,
I think he turned the mic off. So, yeah.
thank you. I turned it off instead of on. Yeah, when we started this this project, the NIST stuff back in 2021 fall, our retention was 73%. Last fall of 2024, our retention was 76%. So about a 3% increase in retention at Fort Hays State since we started doing the NIST stuff. Many of the investments that we made were ongoing investments, things like centralized advising, EAB Navigate to kind of get early alert systems in place, things like that are ongoing expenses. We think that our ongoing expenses are about $733,000 that at this point. We spend $1 million, but some of that's one-time stuff, and that stuff has been purchased and it's gone off. So we kind of think that's where it is. If you kind of think of that on a dollar for dollar basis, return on investment, we get about $400,000 per percent. So, that's revenue that we get. If you look at just tuition revenue, every percent of tuition revenue is about $400,000. So in some ways, yeah, I can see that, but so there's some numbers.
I would really encourage all of us, and I mean, starting with the system marketing efforts, but with all of your marketing efforts at your institution, make sure the state knows and hears those success numbers, because obviously it was an investment, and to hear that it's paying off and now starting to generate financial returns, that's something that all of our stakeholders need to be aware of. Great to hear. Questions so far from any of my colleagues? Yes, Regent Winter. Very good. Thank you for saying that.
I might add, Mr. Chairman, to follow up on Regent Winter's comments about bearing fruit from the state general fund. As we think looking ahead to the budget workshop and the materials the universities would provide to the board in advance, one of the first pages of that material relates to student enrollment data, Pell eligibility, domestic resident, international students, Candace resident students. One of the things that I thought might be helpful to add to that would be the rate of student retention from fall to fall in that cohort. That is a calculation we do each year of the data. It's in our Key Stats portal. So I thought that might be helpful so that we can use that kind of information to support and bolster the potential system-wide requests for student success. This affects not only the universities, but also our two-year colleges as well.
Absolutely. That's very well said. Any other themes that you guys did a great job of encapsulating that? Any other themes that we need to be aware of from a system perspective as far as your needs for the next year? Angela, anything from the ESU standpoint?
I'll just jump in on the NIST money, and I think for us as well, it's had an impact. Whether or not we can put numbers to that, I'm not sure, because of the additional funds that we're going to continue supporting those, because we have seen increase in retention year over year, plus fall to fall. I would say as far as like the support that we want to give to like a system ask, I think we will find it hard to continue marketing for under market pay. I do not think that is something that the legislature is probably going to be interested at all. We all need salary funds. I don't think they're interested in helping us get people to what we consider market.
And I know that it affects your ability to attract the kind of folks that Kansas students deserve.
It does, but it also, when we put a number out there that's like 90 million, that feels completely unattainable. I think it turns them off before we can even have a good conversation about it.
Okay. Appreciate that feedback. Vice President Frisbee, anything else? Any thoughts related to system request?
I don't think so, Mr. Chairman. Just to highlight some of the other items, subsequent to the publication in the board agenda, Fort Hays State provided some additional information about their request, part of which notes the student success funding and that reduction that was applied in 26 compared to 25. Hoping for restoration of that. Washburn, you may be familiar with the expansion of Washburn Tech to North Topeka. And so they are seeking some one-time funding for equipment to support their manufacturing program up there, as well as their new program, their new campus project to consolidate all of our allied health into one facility at the Washburn campus. So one-time funding for that. The two-year colleges, just to highlight them a bit, everyone from the Tech Ed Authority and the two-year colleges, both community and technical, want to see continued support for tiered and non-tiered courses. We've had several years now where the legislature has fully funded the instructional cost model calculation. So that's been remarkable after so many years of not receiving that. The community colleges are thinking that there could be some changes made to how high school students are paid for in the model. And so they are in a goal to reduce state funding a bit, predicting that perhaps there could be over $12 million in state aid funding, potentially between tiered and non-tiered courses, as well as Excel and CTE. We won't know the amounts for 27 until probably December of this year. So we always kind of label that as TBD, but we'll be working on that in the fall with the colleges and basically holding on to the state funding that they've had so far, the capital outlay aid, the business and industry apprenticeship funding. They're seeking to hold that flat, fund the Campus Restoration Act at the amount that the legislature committed to. And then the technical colleges have received now for several years funding at $10.5 million. And this year it was reduced to $7 million, where every technical college gets an operating grant, which is essentially a state subsidy to help the institutions generate funding to start new programs in their area that need some support. They also seek student success funding, keep that back at the level where they were, because they've also committed, very similar to the universities, to hiring advisors and doing more to help students navigate to a degree completion. And then the tech colleges always note full funding of the Promise Scholarship Act and the adult education programs that the Board of Regents administers. Some of that uncertainty at the federal level does affect us in our adult education program. That is a federal program that the state matches, serves working adults who are trying to upskill and earn a high school credential and also get, maybe basic literacy or numeracy skills. So hoping that remains in place, depending on how the big, beautiful bill pans out with the Senate. We'll see how that goes, but just a whole array of things here. You will note though, and you'll see in the board agenda, this table is quite a bit shorter than we've had in the past few years.
Yeah.
Some work has been done for that.
Absolutely. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank you all for that as well. I thanked you for your timing and bumping it up, but clearly this is a much smaller list than we've seen in several years. And We want to be cognizant of budget projections and make sure that we are keeping that mindful, and I know that you are. Jeff?
One other topic that I hope we can discuss at the retreat in August and just kind of get it out here. We spend, if not daily, certainly multiple times a week, discussing the research impacts that are hitting the universities, and particularly Wichita State, K-State, but all of us get hit by this in some way. And you'll see in our requests, they're all research related because that's on our mind right now of how do you pivot to a more clinical partners or more business partners in terms of your research, and where do you go get that money in another way? The reason why I bring this up, and it kind of came up last year, is the state of Missouri is pumping $100 million into University of Missouri for research, and they're hiring our faculty away with that money. That's an actual thing that's happening. And so I don't know that we have a solution, but I think it's something. And you probably saw yesterday the economic impact study for KU that came out, $7.8 billion a year to the Kansas economy. And we all could do those economic impact studies and show, what we do for the community and for the state. And so it is, from a state's perspective, how do we incentivize, have the state be a partner in the research side? Is just something I think might be worthwhile. I don't have any genius ideas at the moment, but it's just something I think we want to talk about. So you'll see our requests are research related because of that. We want the base and all those other things, but it's how do you pivot in terms of how you do research as a research university in the world that we're living in now and may be living in for a long time. And that discussion, I think, needs to happen at the state level and at the Board of Regents level. And it's something the chancellor will bring it up again as well. So I just throw that out for thoughts before August, maybe noodle that a bit. So,
Okay. Yeah.
thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Jeff.
Jeff, on that, yeah, I know last year we had that 50 million in at one point in time. Is there any way to take it from research to specific type of research or areas that you would focus on?
That's what our requests are, 4 areas. So it's a great question. We're kind of focusing on 3 core areas of where we can do research, where we think there's partners that will work with us, like energy and all the impacts that can have on the state, big data and how that helps all the industry, and obviously, cancer, brain health, things like that. So you'll see our requests are more targeted to a specific area because of that very issue. But I think we probably need to get more granular going to your comment. So yeah, I think it's a great.
'Cause I mean, sometimes, when you just say research,
Yeah.
when you're speaking to a mass group like the legislature, they just hear one word and it's like, they don't know what they're looking at. So it's easy to say no.
I think it's more applied and more impact on the economy is the way we're trying to, what's the impact on the Kansas economy of us doing different types of research? Those are discussions we're having because we have to pivot. We all do to get, and the one that pivots the best is going to have the lead out of this. So these are discussions we're having.
Mhm.
And I have another question for Ethan, and not to bring this back up, but a number of comments on cybersecurity. How much of the legislature knows or realizes what K-State went through, 18 months ago, in that regard, and what the risk was to the students that they were not going to be able to use their computer? And because I think a lot of times when we think of cybersecurity as an individual, you think of somebody stealing your identity or your cards versus shutting down a system, a business, a university. How well was that communicated to the masses of the legislature so they understand the importance of cybersecurity to everybody in the state university, that, somebody's shutting down a university?
So I think it's a delicate balance about how broadly you talk about this. We did keep the legislative leadership apprised of the actions we were taking in response to that cyber incident. But also understanding that we don't want to talk too broadly about and disclose a lot of information that then could potentially be continued to be out in the public arena. But I do think we kept the leadership apprised that then my assumption would be that they were also then keeping the rest of the legislative body apprised of what was occurring at that time, and then the actions that we were taking in order to secure the network. I do believe there is at least in some sense, I think the technology committee and the legislative body, and I apologize, I can't remember the name of it right now. I don't know. One of the Elaine, do you know what the name of it is?
Joint Committee on IT?
Yep, there you go. That'd be an easy one to remember, you'd think. I do know that they do consider cybersecurity a critical piece, and I think they've also had some audits recently come through from the legislative post audit that has talking around those terms. But I think anything that we can do to continue to reinforce that this is not just a individual agency issue, this is a state issue that we need to address. And it's critical, and it is going to take funding. I think anything that we can do to try to continue to spread that message is important.
Thank you, Ethan. I do have a follow-up question for Jeff related to the research. And, we just talked about the investment in student success, and with that, the measurables are easier to define. You invest in this, and you expect to see increased retention rates. Related to research, given that so much of it is unknown, which is why you're researching it, how do you establish metrics for success looking backwards?
I think, and you've seen this really heavily at the medical center, and this is where the trajectory slowing down is having an impact. It's the growth in awarded grants that the percent growth in grants awards and the direct, and then the impact of those on the state. So how many spinoffs do you get? So things that we talk about in the economic impact study is what of the research does, how much of it spins off into other patents and licenses and companies and things like that. So the study that just came out yesterday has a lot of data that you could go to see what research has done for the state. And directly though, year to year, we look at growth, how many grants did we apply for? Because one of the things that's important, this is why the Missouri issue is important, is you want to bring those people in that are really good at getting those awards and really good at leading those researches. And you got to make sure you have the spaces in the labs and the wet labs for them. We're going to open a cancer center here. Groundbreaking was a couple weeks ago. Some of you were there. There's going to be 11 to 13 researchers on every floor. Those people are not inexpensive to attract from the best and brightest into those labs. But then that has a big return on it because you start bringing in federal grants, you start bringing in, partnerships with pharmaceutical companies, and all those types of things. So I think it's the growth is how we measure it in the short term, but you can also measure it by looking at the economic spinoff impact of that research. The thing about the reason why university research is so important as opposed to private sector research, the private sector research has a pretty short horizon that they're willing to wait for an outcome. They can't wait 10, 15 years for that cure to come. Universities, that's what we do. We have the patience of the type of people we attract and the way the institutions goes, because cures for cancer don't necessarily come in 2 years. They come in 10 or 15 years. And that is why, in my very strong opinion, I think most people in academia would say this, is why university research is so critical. And so you can't measure it. It takes time to get that spinoff, to get that drug that comes to that therapy that comes out. But you can measure it. You just have to do it over a longer horizon. But year to year, are you getting the grants? Are you attracting the researchers to get those grants? Are those grants meaningful? And they likely have an outcome, if that helps.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good distinction on the horizons. Yes, Regent Rolfe.
Hey, just one, I won't be there obviously, but one thought as you're putting all this together and thinking about how it's packaged, I'd look at the SGF investment from the state the last couple of years, once it's all bundled up, versus kind of what gets counted as recurring, what gets counted as new and all that. I've found it's really constructive when you're talking to legislators and taxpayers and all that, that you talk about, hey, the state's made this level of investment in higher ed the past several years, and we're asking for a very similar amount this year, whatever that is. And so I think that's just great context for it. As we're looking at, because there's some things that move in and out in that, but I think really as they're looking at it as a part of the SGF spend, there's a good argument to be made to say, hey, we're just asking you to hold the investment that you're making in higher ed. Allocate it a little differently, but let's keep it going.
Yeah, well said. Yes, Regent Winter.
Yeah, on there.
Mike,
Join my colleague,
you may turn your mic on.
join my colleague. Go out the door. Oh, folks. I think, not only is it important to simplify the ask, but I think it's really important for Board of Regents, university presidents, et cetera, to have a much higher visibility ratio across. We need to be willing to go over there, do the hard work, go into the offices, House members, let them know how important it is. We haven't done much of that, at least I haven't. But we have a formidable group of people, particularly be engaged, in that activity. It's hard work.
Work of advocacy is never done. All right, anything else related to the first blush of the unified budget request submissions?
I'll make one. Yeah. Jeff, on the four you have in there, are they really all $10 million or is that just a placeholder? Because it kind of looks like you just, if we're looking at all this, it looks like you just threw it.
There are a lot more than that.
Yeah.
That was a cap we're given. That would help us toward them. It would not fund them.
Yeah.
So it is like giving us the seed money to get those things going is how we were approaching it, giving us a startup cost of those, if you will. And then we would have.
Understanding that, would it be better to have them kind of different numbers where it looked like there was something that was specifically funding versus just,
I mean, the challenge is, with this we're all doing this fairly quickly.
Mm.
And so we're focusing on research because that's our hit right now, right? But there's other priorities we have too, like, buildings and cybersecurity and all those types of things. So that is a list, I think, from our perspective to discuss where we're focusing our research areas on. But yeah, the numbers could be, none of them all of them cost more than that. So yes, we could do that. But I also want to make the context, that's not an exhaustive priority list. It is, I think,
No,
for a discussion for all of us, how do we get the state to understand the value of research? How do we get the state to understand the risk of cybersecurity? But yes, we could make every one of those different because none of them are fully funded with those numbers. We took the 10 and took it to the limit. That's how we approach the exercise.
just if somebody were looking at it, just kind of, I guess, me looking at it like,
I get it.
yeah.
We'll just take $6 off of it and it'll look much more targeted. Yeah. Yeah. All right, anything else before we move on? Yes, absolutely, Wesley. Keep turning the mic off when somebody leaves.
It's okay. I just recognized when I gave some data, it was accurate data, but I was comparing a little bit of apples and oranges. The $400,000 number is enrollment total, and a percentage increase in retention does not necessarily translate to a percentage increase in enrollment. And so I just wanted to make sure that was very clear. Actually, I did the calculation on this, and for us to make up the $1 million in this money, we'd have to have a retention rate over 100%. So just keep that in mind, that we'd have to be 101% of retention in order to make up the full $1 million in retention in this funding. So
Be impressive if you had a retention rate over 100.
yeah.
Sounds like you'll be in the business of cloning.
If we figure, hey, there's a research initiative, Jeff, we could do that and clone students. That would be fun. But yeah, thank you.
Get that rumor started. All right. All right. Anything from Director Bristow? Come on up, Chad.
Okay, I'll just echo what Elaine and Ethan have already touched on about the Campus Restoration Act. You know, certainly important to try to advocate for full funding of that for the full duration. And with that in mind, looking ahead, the universities, of course, are finalizing those long-term plans. We'll bring them back to the board for review and approval at the September meeting. We've had an approval of the original allocation back in December. Of course, last month revised that allocation, and so the board's approval of that was contingent upon receiving these final plans in September. And then also looking ahead, at September, we'll have a first read of a facilities policy update that this committee expressed interest in back in April to potentially streamline some of the approval processes and unnecessary time lags associated with getting capital projects approved. The universities have weighed in with some updates on that, and I think are doing a one last review to make sure that that is in a form that everybody supports coming into the September meeting. And then kind of a wider angle, the universities are also working to add campus infrastructure condition assessments to our building data. And the board's policy right now states that by October 2027, that all buildings and infrastructure, which would be underground, horizontal, campus drives, parking lots, all of that campus infrastructure on state property will be represented in the database. So that will be a comprehensive database and will be a great support for planning and budgeting long into the future. So the universities are working on adding that information. Sounds easy. It takes a lot of coordination, and it's, added onto their normal routine. So appreciate all the effort on that. And then finally, just as 2025 wraps up, the fiscal year wraps up, the universities will start on their reporting. And now that we have an annual facilities report, all that facilities condition data, space inventory, space utilization data will be amassed in a single report. So they'll be working on that. That's all I have for now.
Well, thank you for your leadership and all your efforts in making that happen, Chad. Really appreciated. Yes, Vice President.
If I might just tag on to what Director Bristow just said, one thing that the universities are benefiting from very directly, I think, is the application of all this information and data on the infrastructure and the facilities for going out to the market for property insurance. You may not think of that as a direct result, but I think we're seeing some financial savings in how we are able to demonstrate the condition and the quantity, just the volume of what we have to get really good clarity on that. So that's been a great application of that.
Very good. Thank you for that. All right, Elaine, any audit findings that we need to discuss this morning?
None, Mr. Chairman.
Any other business to come before Fiscal Affairs and Audit this morning? Be the shortest meeting of the year. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and obviously we'll recognize them here in a couple of hours, but thank you so much to Regent Rolfe, Regent Winter. Thank you for your service on this committee. Just thank you for all your service over the last 6 years, the last 4 years on the board in general, but really appreciate you guys being a part of this group. All right, hearing nothing, we will adjourn and appreciate everybody's time this morning.